The air in Millfield, Ohio, carried the sharp bite of autumn. But for Eli Carter, the cold came from inside his house. At 18, he stood at the edge of his bedroom, heart pounding, staring at the suitcase his father had thrown onto his bed. Pack. His dad had barked, voice like gravel. You're going to Pastor Dan's tomorrow, I'll fix this. Eli's world tilted. He'd known the moment he told his parents he was gay would crack something irreparable. But he hadn't expected his father, Tom, a man who'd taught him to throw a football and change a tire, to look at him like he was a stranger. His mother, Ellen, had stood in the doorway, silent, her eyes wet but her lips pressed tight. The weight of their rejection pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Fix this. Like he was a broken engine part, not their son. He sank onto the bed, fingers tracing the worn quilt his grandma had made. Millfield was small. Its church is smaller. And Pastor Dan's counseling was whispered about in hushed tones, something about saving souls, straightening paths. Eli had heard the rumors, kids sent away, coming back hollow, reciting scriptures like robots. His best friend, Marcus, had warned him not to tell his parents. But Eli had believed naively, stupidly, that love would outweigh their fear. Now, he faced a truth colder than the October wind. His dad thought he needed fixing, and his mom wouldn't stop it. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked too loudly. Eli crept to the stairs, catching fragments of his parents' voices. It's for his own good, Ellen, Tom said, his tone heavy with conviction. Dan's helped others. He'll help Eli. Ellen's voice trembled, barely audible. What if it hurts him more? Eli's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to beg her to fight for him. But the words stayed trapped. Instead, he returned to his room, staring at the suitcase like it was a prison cell. Morning came too fast. The drive to Pastor Dan's house was silent. The radio off, the hum of the truck's engine filling the void. Tom gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, while Eli stared out the window at the fading cornfields. Pastor Dan lived on the edge of town, in a modest brick house with a cross hanging above the door. When they arrived, Dan greeted them with a smile that didn't reach his eye. Some man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with a Bible tucked under his arm like a weapon. Eli, welcome, Dan said, his voice syrupy. We'll work together to find your true path. Eli's stomach churned. He glanced at his dad, hoping for a flicker of doubt. But Tom just nodded, clapped Dan's shoulder, and drove away. Eli stood on the porch, abandoned, the suitcase heavy in his hand. Inside, Dan's house smelled of old books and candle wax. The living room was sparse, a couch, a wooden cross on the wall, and a stack of pamphlets with titles like Freedom from Temptation. Dan sat across from Eli, leaning forward, his eyes searching. Your father loves you, he began. He wants you to be whole. This attraction you feel, it's a test. We'll overcome it together. Eli's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue, to shout that love wasn't a sin. But fear kept him quiet. Dan handed him a booklet, its cover worn and creased. Read this tonight. We start tomorrow. Eli's room was a small guest bedroom upstairs, with a single bed and a window overlooking a barren backyard. He sat on the mattress, the booklet unopened in his lap. His phone buzzed a text from Marcus. You okay? Call me. Eli's fingers hovered over the screen, but he didn't reply. Marcus was the one person who understood, the one who'd held his hand in secret under the bleachers last spring, their lips brushing in a moment that felt like freedom. But Marcus couldn't save him now. That night, Eli lay awake, the house creaking around him. He thought of his mom's trembling voice, his dad's cold resolve. He thought of Marcus, waiting for a sign Eli was still himself. The booklet lay untouched on the nightstand, its promises of healing feeling like chains. Eli didn't need fixing, needed his family to see him. But as the hours ticked by, a seed of doubt took root. What if they were right? What if he was wrong? Morning brought no answers. Dan's sessions began with prayer, his voice booming through the small room. Lord, guide Eli back to your truth. Eli stared at the floor, his hands clasped tightly. Dan spoke of sin, of resisting temptation, of a life aligned with God's plan. Each word felt like a hammer, chipping away at Eli's resolve. He wanted to fight back, to hold on to the truth of who he was. But the weight of his father's expectations, his mother's silence, and Dan's relentless certainty pressed harder. By the third day, Eli felt like he was drowning. Dan's methods grew sharper, hours of reading scriptures, writing confessions of his struggles, and listening to stories of others who'd been cured. Eli's defiance waned, replaced by exhaustion. He missed Marcus, missed the way his laugh could light up the darkest moments. But doubt gnawed at him. What if this was his only way back to his family? What if love meant losing them forever? Then, on the fourth day, everything changed. A knock at the door interrupted Dan's lecture. Eli looked up, startled, as Marcus stood in the doorway, his dark eyes blazing with determination. I'm not letting you do this alone, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. Dan's face darkened, but Marcus didn't back down. He crossed the room, took Eli's hand, and pulled him to his feet. In that moment, Eli felt the spark of who he was reignite. Marcus had come for him. But what came next would test them both and shatter the fragile world Eli's family had built. Marcus's grip on Eli's hand was warm, unyielding, a lifeline in the sterile chill of Pastor Dan's living room. The older man stood, his Bible clutched like a shield, his voice low and warning. This is a place of healing. Young man, you're interfering with God's work. Marcus didn't flinch. At 19, he carried a quiet strength, honed by years of navigating a town that didn't always welcome his black, queer identity. Eli's not broken, he said, eyes locked on Dan's. You don't get to decide who he is. Eli's heart raced, caught between fear and a swelling hope. Marcus's presence felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. But the weight of Dan's glare in the shadow of his father's expectations kept him tethered to doubt. Marcus, you shouldn't be here, Eli whispered, his voice cracking. He wanted to collapse into Marcus's arms, to let the world fall away. But the room felt like a battlefield, and he wasn't sure whose side he was on. Dan stepped forward, his tone sharp. Eli, your friend is confused, just like you. Sit down, both of you. We'll talk this through. But Marcus shook his head, pulling Eli toward the door. We're leaving. Now. Eli hesitated, glancing at the pamphlets on the table, their promises of a better life taunting him. What if Marcus was wrong? What if this was his only chance to be the son his dad wanted? Outside, the autumn air hit Eli like a slap, clearing the fog in his mind. Marcus led him to his beat-up Honda, parked crookedly on the curb. Get in, Marcus said, his voice softer now, urgent but kind. Eli slid into the passenger seat, his suitcase forgotten in Dan's house. As Marcus drove, the silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Marcus spoke. Why didn't you tell me they were sending you to that guy? Eli stared at his hands, twisted in his lap. I didn't want you to worry. And I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I could change. The words tasted bitter, like betrayal. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. Eli, you don't need to change. You're enough. You've always been enough. Eli's eyes burned, tears threatening to spill. He wanted to believe Marcus. But years of hearing he was wrong, broken, a disappointment, had carved deep wounds. They pulled into the parking lot of Millfield's only diner, a neon-lit relic with cracked vinyl booths. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried onions grounded Eli, tethering him to the present. Marcus ordered them both milkshake Escalade for Eli, strawberry for himself, and sat across from him, his gaze steady. "Talk to me," Marcus said. "What's going on in your head?" Eli traced the rim of his glass, struggling to find words. "My dad, he thinks I'm choosing this. Like I woke up one day and decided to make his life harder. My mom, she doesn't say anything, but I know she's scared. For me. For him. For all of us." He paused, his voice dropping. "I don't want to lose them, Marcus. But I don't want to lose myself either." Marcus reached across the table, his hand covering Eli's. "You won't lose yourself. I won't let you. And your parents, they might come around. But you can't let them decide who you are." Eli's chest ached with the weight of Marcus's words. He wanted to believe in a world where his family could love him as he was. But the memory of his dad's cold stare lingered like a bruise. Their conversation was cut short by a text from Eli's mom. "Where are you? Pastor Dan called. Your father's furious." Eli's stomach dropped. Marcus saw the change in his face and grabbed the phone. "Don't answer yet. Let's figure this out together." But Eli knew there was no escaping the storm waiting at home. His dad would see Marcus's involvement as proof of Eli's problem, and his mom's silence would only deepen the rift. They drove to Marcus's house, a small rental on the edge of town where he lived with his older sister, Lena. She was 25, a nurse with a sharp wit and a fierce protective streak. When they walked in, Lena took one look at Eli's pale face and pulled him into a hug. "You're safe here," she said, her voice firm. "No one's dragging you back to that place." Eli nodded, but the knot in his chest didn't loosen. Safety felt temporary, like a borrowed coat. That night, Eli slept on Marcus's couch, the hum of the TV in the background of faint comfort. Marcus sat beside him, their shoulders touching, a quiet promise of solidarity. But Eli's dreams were restless, filled with his dad's voice, Dan's prayers, and the fear that he'd never be enough. When he woke, Marcus was still there, sketching in a notebook, his presence a steady anchor. The next morning, Lena made pancakes, her chatter filling the silence. "You two need a plan," she said, pointing a spatula at them. "Your dad's not going to let this go. Eli, you need to decide what you're fighting for." Eli looked at Marcus, whose eyes held a quiet strength. He wanted to fight for himself, for Marcus, for the chance to be whole. But the path ahead felt like walking through fire. By noon, Eli's phone buzzed again. This time, it was his dad. "Come home. Now. We're not done." Marcus grabbed his keys before Eli could respond. "I'm coming with you," he said. Eli wanted to protest, to protect Marcus from his father's anger. But the thought of facing Tom alone was unbearable. They drove back to Eli's house, the weight of the confrontation looming like a gathering storm. The Carter house loomed like a fortress as Eli and Marcus pulled into the driveway. The porch light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the lawn. Eli's heart thudded, each step toward the front door feeling like a march to judgment. Marcus stayed close, his presence a quiet defiance against the storm waiting inside. Eli knocked, his hand trembling, and when the door swung open, Tom's face was a mask of barely contained fury. "Where the hell have you been?" Tom's voice boomed, his eyes flicking to Marcus with a scowl. "And why's he here?" Eli opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Carter, Eli needed a friend. I'm not here to cause trouble." Tom's jaw tightened, his gaze cutting back to Eli. Get inside. Now. The living room was suffocating, the air thick with tension. Ellen sat on the couch, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting between her husband and son. Tom pointed at Marcus. You. Out. This is family business. But Eli grabbed Marcus's arm, his voice breaking through his fear. He stays. He's part of this. Tom's face reddened, but Marcus nodded, taking a seat beside Eli, their knees brushing in silent support. Tom paced, his voice low and dangerous. You think running off with him proves anything? You're confused. Eli, Pastor Dan was helping you, and you threw it away. Eli's chest tightened, the weight of his father's words pressing down. Dad, I'm not confused. I'm gay. That's who I am. The admission hung in the air, raw and unyielding. Ellen's breath hitched, but she didn't speak. Tom stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. You don't get to decide that. You're my son, and I won't let you ruin your life. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady. Mr. Carter, with all due respect, Eli's not ruining anything. He's trying to live honestly. Isn't that what you want for him? Tom's glare could have burned through steel. Don't you dare tell me what's best for my son. Ellen finally spoke, her voice trembling. Tom, please, let's just talk. But Tom ignored her, his focus on Eli. You're going back to Dan's tomorrow. End of discussion. Eli's stomach dropped. He looked at Marcus, whose eyes held a fierce encouragement, and then at his mom, whose silence felt like a betrayal. No, Eli said, the words small but heavy. I'm not going back. The room went still. Tom's face contorted, a mix of anger and disbelief. What did you say? Eli stood, his legs shaky but his resolve growing. I'm not going back. I'm not broken. Dad, I'm not a mistake. Marcus reached for his hand, squeezing it gently, and Eli felt a surge of courage. I love Marcus, and I'm done pretending I don't. Tom's fists clenched, and for a moment, Eli thought he might lash out. But Ellen stood, her voice cutting through the tension. Enough. Tom. He's our son. Her words were soft but firm, the first crack in her silence. Tom turned to her, stunned, as if seeing her for the first time. Ellen, you can't seriously. I am serious, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I've been quiet too long. I won't lose him because of your fear. Eli's throat tightened, a mix of relief and grief washing over him. His mom's words were a lifeline, but his dad's silence felt like a wall. The argument stretched into the night, voices rising and falling like a tide. Tom's anger gave way to stubborn silence, while Ellen's quiet strength grew. Marcus stayed by Eli's side, his presence a reminder that Eli wasn't alone. But the rift in the family was undeniable, a chasm widened by truth and fear. When Tom finally stormed out, slamming the door behind him, Eli felt both free and broken. Ellen pulled Eli into a hug, her sobs shaking them both. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have spoken up sooner. Eli clung to her, the warmth of her embrace a contrast to the coldness of his father's rejection. Marcus watched, his eyes soft with understanding. But Eli knew this was only the beginning. Tom wasn't done fighting, and the town's judgment loomed like a shadow. The next day, Eli and Marcus returned to Lena's house, needing space to breathe. Lena greeted them with coffee and a no-nonsense attitude. Your dad's gonna need time, she said, setting a mug in front of Eli. But you've got people who love you. Focus on that. Eli nodded, but the ache in his chest didn't ease. He wanted his dad's acceptance, not just his absence. Marcus suggested they take a walk, and they ended up at the town's old park, where they'd first admitted their feelings under a starlit sky. The swings creaked as they sat, the silence between them comfortable but heavy. "What if he never comes around?" Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took his hand, his thumb tracing circles on Eli's skin. "Then we build our own family. But I believe in you, Eli, and I believe in us." Those words carried Eli through the next few days. But the tension in Millfield grew. Whispers followed him at the grocery store, at church, in the diner where he and Marcus had once felt safe. Pastor Dan's influence ran deep, and Eli's defiance had made him a target. But Marcus never wavered, his love a steady flame against the town's cold judgment. The days blurred into a tense rhythm, with Eli splitting his time between Lena's house and cautious visits to his mom. Ellen had started calling daily, her voice a mix of guilt and determination as she tried to bridge the gap Tom's silence had left. But Millfield's small-town gaze tightened around Eli like a noose. At the hardware store, old Mr. Jenkins, a deacon at Dan's church, muttered "sinner" under his breath as Eli passed. At the diner, their usual waitress served them with a tight-lipped smile, her eyes avoiding Marcus's. The town was choosing sides, and Eli felt the weight of their judgment. Marcus, ever resilient, refused to let the whispers dim his fire. He dragged Eli to the library, where they'd spend hours reading old comics, or to the edge of town, where they'd sit by the creek and talk about a future beyond Millfield. "We could go to Columbus," Marcus said one afternoon, tossing a pebble into the water. "Bigger city, more people like us. A fresh start." Eli wanted to believe in that dream, but the thought of leaving his mom and the faint hope of his dad's acceptance kept him tethered. One evening, Lena came home from her shift at the hospital, her face grim. "Pastor Dan's been talking at church," she said, tossing her keys on the counter. "He's calling you a lost soul, Eli, and saying Marcus is leading you astray. People are listening." Eli's stomach sank. Marcus cursed under his breath, but his hand found Eli's, grounding him. "Let them talk," Marcus said. "They don't know us." But the talk wasn't just words. The next morning, Eli found a note taped to Lena's front door, "Repent or leave." The words, scrawled in black marker, sent a chill down his spine. Lena tore it down, her jaw set. "Cowards," she muttered, but her eyes were worried. Eli felt the walls closing in, the town he'd grown up in turning into a cage. Marcus pulled him close, whispering, "We're stronger than this. They can't break us." Eli wanted to believe him, but fear was a relentless shadow. He started avoiding the main streets, sticking to back roads when he visited his mom. Ellen was trying, cooking Eli's favorite meals and asking about Marcus. But her eyes were haunted. "Your dad's been talking to Dan," she admitted one night, her hands twisting a dish towel. "He thinks he's protecting you." Eli's chest ached. Protecting him by tearing him apart. The breaking point came at the town's annual fall festival. Eli hadn't wanted to go, but Marcus insisted they show their faces, refusing to let fear win. The festival was a blur of lights, music, and the smell of caramel apples, but the stairs followed them like spotlights. When they stopped at a booth to buy cider, a group of men friends of Tom's from the auto shop blocked their path. "You don't belong here," one growled, his eyes on Marcus. Eli stepped forward, heart pounding, but Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "We're not here to fight," Marcus said, his voice calm but edged with steel. The confrontation drew a crowd, whispers rippling through the festival. Eli's eyes scanned the faces, landing on his dad, standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Eli thought he'd step in, say something, Anything. But Tom turned and walked away, leaving Eli's hope to crumble. Marcus pulled him away, their hands clasped tightly, but the sting of his father's silence burned. Back at Lena's, Eli broke. "He's never going to change," he said, tears streaming down his face. Marcus held him, letting him sob, his own eyes wet. "He might," Marcus whispered, "but you don't need his approval to be you." Lena joined them, her voice fierce. "You've got us, Eli. And your mom's trying. That's more than nothing." The next day, Eli woke to a voicemail from his mom. "I'm coming over. We need to talk, all of us." When Ellen arrived, her face was pale but resolute. She sat across from Eli and Marcus, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. "I've been talking to a counselor," she said. "Not Dan. Someone who understands this. I want to understand you, Eli. I want our family back." Eli's throat tightened, hope and fear warring inside him. Marcus squeezed his hand, a silent promise. But Tom was still a ghost, his absence louder than any argument. Ellen admitted he'd been staying late at the shop, avoiding home, avoiding her. "He's hurting," she said, her voice soft. "But he's wrong. I see that now." Eli wanted to believe her, but the memory of his dad walking away at the festival lingered like a wound. As the days passed, Eli and Marcus leaned on each other, their love a quiet rebellion against the town's judgment. Lena became their fiercest ally, confronting neighbors who whispered too loudly and shielding them from the worst of the gossip. But the question of Tom hung over them, a storm cloud waiting to break. Eli knew he'd have to face his dad again, but the thought of another rejection terrified him. Winter crept into Millfield, the air sharp with frost, mirroring the chill in Eli's heart. He and Marcus spent their days navigating a town that felt increasingly hostile, their love a quiet act of defiance. Ellen's efforts to rebuild their relationship gave Eli a flicker of hope, but Tom's absence was a constant ache. He hadn't spoken to Eli since the festival, and the silence was louder than any argument. Ellen's counselor, Dr. Patel, became an unexpected ally, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile and a no-nonsense approach. She met with Eli and Ellen weekly, helping them untangle the knots of fear and misunderstanding. "Your dad's struggling with his own beliefs," Dr. Patel told Eli during one session. "It's not about you, it's about his fear of losing control." Eli nodded, but the words didn't erase the pain of his dad's rejection. Marcus, meanwhile, was a rock, but even he showed cracks. One night, as they sat on Lena's porch, he admitted, "I'm scared, Eli. Not of us, but of what this town might do to you." Eli leaned against him, their breaths visible in the cold air. "I'm scared too," he said, "but you make me braver." Marcus smiled, but his eyes were heavy with worry. The tension in Millfield escalated when Pastor Dan announced a community prayer at the church, a thinly veiled rally against sinful influences. Lena warned Eli and Marcus to stay away, but curiosity and a stubborn need to face their critics drew them to the church's parking lot. Through the windows, they saw Dan at the pulpit, his voice booming about saving the youth. Eli's name wasn't spoken, but the implication was clear. A handful of congregants glanced their way, their stares cold. Marcus tugged Eli's sleeve. "Let's go. This isn't worth it." But before they could leave, Tom appeared, stepping out of the church's side door. His eyes locked on Eli, and for a moment, Tom stopped. Eli braced for anger, but Tom's face was unreadable, a mix of exhaustion and something softer regret. "Maybe, Dad," Eli said, his voice barely audible. Tom hesitated, then turned back inside, leaving Eli's heart in pieces. The encounter shook Eli, but it also lit a fire. He was done waiting for his dad to change. With Marcus and Lena's help, he started researching colleges in Columbus, dreaming of a place where they could live openly. Ellen supported the idea, even offering to help with applications. "You deserve to be happy," she told Eli, her eyes fierce with love. But the thought of leaving Millfield and his dad felt like abandoning hope. One afternoon, while helping Lena at the community center, Eli overheard a conversation that stopped him cold. Two women, regulars at Dan's church, were whispering about Tom. "He's been meeting with Dan every night," one said. "Says he's praying for a miracle." Eli's heart sank. A miracle to fix him, or to fix their family. He didn't know anymore. That night, Eli made a decision. He couldn't keep running from his dad's shadow. With Marcus by his side, he drove to the auto shop where Tom worked late. The garage was quiet. The only sound the clink of tools as Tom worked on a truck. He looked up, startled, as Eli and Marcus stepped into the light. "We need to talk," Eli said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. Tom wiped his hands on a rag, his expression guarded. "What's there to say?" Eli took a deep breath, Marcus's hand brushing his for courage. "I'm your son, Dad. I love Marcus, and I'm not ashamed of who I am. I want you in my life, but I won't let you erase me." Tom's face flickered, a crack in his stoic facade. For the first time, Eli saw not anger, but pain. The conversation was raw, halting. Tom admitted he'd been raised to believe love like Eli's was wrong, a sin he couldn't reconcile. "I thought I was saving you," he said, his voice breaking. Eli's eyes stung. "You were breaking me, Dad." Marcus stayed silent, his presence a quiet strength. Tom didn't apologize, but he didn't walk away either. It was a start, fragile and uncertain. As they left the shop, Marcus pulled Eli close. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with pride. Eli nodded, but his heart was heavy. He'd faced his dad, but the road to healing was long. Back at Lena's, they planned their next steps, college applications, a future in Columbus, a life where they could be free. But Eli couldn't shake the image of his dad's pained eyes, a glimmer of hope in the wreckage. Spring arrived in Millfield, tentative and fragile, much like the hope Eli clung to. His talks with Tom remained strained, but they were talking short. Careful conversations at the kitchen table, mediated by Ellen's quiet strength. Tom still struggled, his words often tinged with the weight of old beliefs. But he listened more, his silences less hostile. Eli held on to those moments, small as they were, like seeds waiting to bloom. Marcus and Eli were accepted to a community college in Columbus, a step toward the life they dreamed of. Lena threw them a small celebration, her living room filled with balloons and her famous lasagna. Ellen came, her smile brighter than Eli had seen in months. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, hugging him tightly. But Tom didn't show, his absence a quiet sting. Eli pushed it aside, focusing on Marcus's laughter and Lena's teasing. But the hurt lingered. Millfield, however, wasn't ready to let them go quietly. Pastor Dan's influence lingered, his sermons growing sharper, targeting those who stray. A petition circulated, calling for family values to be upheld, and Eli's name was whispered in its margins. Lena, furious, confronted Dan at a town meeting, her voice cutting through the room. "You're tearing families apart, not saving them," she said. Her words met with murmurs of agreement and glares of dissent. Eli watched, heart swelling with gratitude for her courage. But the town's divide was clear. One evening, Marcus and Eli were walking home from the diner when a truck slowed beside them. A man leaned out, one of Tom's co-workers, his voice slurred with alcohol. You two better watch yourselves. He spat, before speeding off. Marcus's hand tightened around Eli's. His jaw set. They're scared of us, he said, his voice low. That's all this is. Eli nodded, but fear settled in his bones. He wanted to believe love was enough, but the world kept testing them. At home, Ellen shared news that shook Eli. Tom had stopped attending Dan's church. He's been reading, she said, her voice cautious. Books about understanding. He's trying. Eli. The revelation was a spark of hope, but Eli guarded it carefully. He'd been burned too many times by hope that led nowhere. The turning point came unexpectedly. Eli and Marcus were at the park, sketching plans for their move to Columbus, when Tom appeared, his work boots scuffed and his hands in his pockets. Eli froze, bracing for another argument. But Tom's voice was soft. Can we talk? Just us. Marcus squeezed Eli's shoulder, a silent encouragement, and stepped away. Tom sat on a bench, his eyes on the ground. I've been wrong, he said, the words heavy. I thought I was protecting you, but I was pushing you away. I don't understand everything, but I don't want to lose you. Eli's throat tightened, tears spilling before he could stop them. I just want you to see me. Dad, he said. Tom nodded, his own eyes wet. I'm trying. Son, I promise I'm trying. The conversation wasn't a cure, but it was a bridge. Tom admitted he'd been meeting with Dr. Patel, wrestling with his beliefs, trying to unlearn decades of fear. It's hard, he said, but you're my son. That's bigger than anything else. Eli hugged him, the first real embrace in months, and felt a piece of his heart mend. Marcus watched from a distance, his smile soft but triumphant. When Eli rejoined him, Marcus pulled him close. You did it, he whispered. Eli shook his head. We did it. You. Me. Mom. Lena. I couldn't have faced him without you. Marcus kissed his forehead, a quiet promise of forever. As summer approached, Eli and Marcus prepared for their move. Ellen helped pack, her laughter filling the house for the first time in years. Tom was quieter, still navigating his journey, but he showed up helping load boxes, asking Marcus about his art. Small steps that spoke louder than words. The town's whispers didn't stop, but they grew fainter, drowned out by the love rebuilding Eli's family. The night before they left for Columbus, Eli stood in his childhood bedroom, the suitcase from months ago now packed with hope instead of fear. Marcus joined him, their hands entwined. Ready for this? Marcus asked. Eli smiled, his heart full. With you. Always. Columbus was a new world, its skyline a promise of freedom. Eli and Marcus moved into a small apartment near the college, its walls bare but full of potential. The city buzzed with life, people who didn't stare, didn't whisper, didn't care who they loved. For the first time, Eli felt like he could breathe, his hand in Marcus's without fear of judgment. But even in this new chapter, Millfield's shadows lingered. Their first semester was a whirlwind of classes, late-night study sessions, and stolen moments exploring the city. Marcus joined an art collective, his sketches gaining attention, while Eli dove into literature, finding solace in stories of resilience. They built a routine coffee at a corner cafe, walks through campus, quiet nights cooking together. But Eli's thoughts often drifted to his dad, to the fragile bridge they'd built. Tom called weekly, his voice still hesitant but warmer, asking about classes, about Marcus. Ellen visited often, her pride in Eli a balm for old wounds. One weekend, Lena drove up from Millfield, her laughter filling their tiny apartment. You two look good, she said, eyeing their cluttered but cozy space. She brought news from home. Pastor Dan's influence was waning, his congregation shrinking as more families questioned his methods. "People are talking about you," she told Eli. "Not all bad, either. You shook things up." Eli wasn't sure if that was a victory, but it felt like progress. The holidays loomed, and with them, a decision: return to Millfield for Christmas or stay in Columbus. Eli wanted to go home, to test the strength of his family's new bonds. But fear gnawed at him. What if Tom's progress faltered? What if the town's judgment resurfaced? Marcus saw the worry in his eyes and made it simple. "We go together. Whatever happens, we face it." The drive to Millfield was quiet, the familiar fields now dusted with snow. When they arrived, Ellen greeted them with hugs and hot cocoa, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold reception Eli had once feared. Tom was there, quieter than usual, but he shook Marcus's hand, a small gesture that felt monumental. Dinner was tentative, conversation careful, but Tom asked about their apartment, their plans, and for the first time, Eli felt seen, not judged. Christmas Eve brought an unexpected moment. As they decorated the tree, Tom pulled Eli aside, handing him a small, wrapped box. Inside was a keychain, a simple leather strap with Eli's initials. "Made it myself," Tom said, his voice gruff. "Thought you'd need something for your new place." Eli's eyes stung. It wasn't just a gift, it was an acknowledgement, a step toward acceptance. The town wasn't fully changed. At the Christmas service, Pastor Dan's sermon carried a familiar edge, though he avoided direct mention of Eli. Some faces still turned away, but others sold classmates. Neighbors offered nods, even smiles. Eli held Marcus's hand, his defiance quieter now, rooted in love rather than fear. Millfield wasn't home anymore, but it was part of him, and he was learning to carry it lightly. Back in Columbus, Eli and Marcus settled into their life, their love growing stronger with each challenge they faced. They hosted Lena for New Year's, her stories of Millfield blending with their new memories. Ellen sent care packages, and Tom's calls became a steady rhythm, each one a brick in the bridge they were rebuilding. Eli knew it wasn't perfect. Tom still stumbled, still wrestled with his past, but it was enough for now. One night, as snow fell outside their apartment, Eli and Marcus sat on their couch, wrapped in a blanket. "We made it," Eli said, his voice soft. Marcus kissed him, his smile bright. "We're just getting started." Eli nodded, his heart full. The journey had been brutal, but it had led them here to a life where love wasn't a battle, but a home. A year later, Eli stood on the balcony of their Columbus apartment, the city lights sprawling below. At 20, he felt older, shaped by the battles he'd fought and the love that had carried him through. Marcus joined him, slipping an arm around his waist, their shared silence a testament to everything they'd overcome. Millfield was a memory now, not a chain, and Eli was learning to live without its weight. Tom's journey continued, slow but steady. He and Ellen visited Columbus every few months, their visits filled with small, meaningful moments: a dinner where Tom laughed at Marcus's jokes, a walk where he asked Eli about his dreams. The keychain Tom had given him hung on Eli's keys, a quiet reminder of his dad's effort. Ellen had become their biggest advocate, joining a support group for parents of queer kids, her voice growing stronger with each meeting. Millfield itself was changing, however slowly. Lena sent updates. Pastor Dan had left for a smaller church in another state, his influence fading as younger voices in the community pushed for inclusion. The diner where Eli and Marcus once faced cold stares now had a rainbow sticker in the window, a small but bold statement. Eli didn't know if he'd ever call Millfield home again, but he no longer felt like its outcast. Eli's college life was a new chapter, one where he could be himself without apology. He and Marcus joined a campus queer alliance, finding friends who understood their story. Marcus's art was gaining traction, his pieces displayed in local galleries, each one a vibrant declaration of their love. Eli found his voice in writing, penning essays about identity and resilience, his words a way to heal and connect. One spring evening, Eli and Marcus hosted a small gathering in their apartment. Lena, Ellen, and Tom were there, along with new friends from college. The room buzzed with laughter, music, and the clink of glasses. Tom raised a toast, his voice unsteady but sincere. To family, he said, his eyes meeting Eli's. To learning, and to love. Eli's heart swelled, tears pricking his eyes as Marcus squeezed his hand. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. The night ended with Eli and Marcus alone on the balcony, the city alive around them. You ever think about where we'd be if you hadn't shown up at Dan's that day? Eli asked, his voice soft. Marcus smiled, his eyes warm. Doesn't matter. I'd find you anywhere. They kissed, the world fading to just them, their love a light that had outshone every shadow. Eli's family was broken once, shattered by fear and misunderstanding. But love fierce, unyielding, and true had rebuilt it, piece by piece. Tom's journey wasn't over, and neither was Eli's. But they were moving forward together. In Columbus, in Millfield, in every quiet moment with Marcus, Eli found what he'd always sought, a place to be whole. Their story wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving, about choosing love over fear, about building a family that could bend but not break. As Eli looked out at the city, Marcus by his side, he knew they'd face whatever came next, together. And that was enough.